The lawyer's words hit like a thunderclap in the crowded conference room. "Everything goes to Tobias Reynolds," he said calmly, sliding the thick document across the polished oak table as my parents' faces turned from shock to pure rage. I sat frozen in the leather chair, heart hammering, while the rest of the family erupted around me. My mother clutched her pearls, whispering, "This can't be right," and my father slammed his fist down so hard the water glasses jumped. Uncle Richard, always the loudest, pointed straight at me and snarled, "That boy manipulated her." We all know it. Outside the high-rise windows of downtown Portland, Oregon, the summer sun poured in bright and unforgiving, turning the room into a spotlight on my shame. I was Tobias Reynolds, 28, graphic designer from San Francisco, the only grandson who had dared to live openly as a gay man. The family had written me off years ago, yet here I was, suddenly the owner of Grandma Margaret's sprawling estate, her investment accounts, the family hardware business, and even the vacation cabin on the coast. None of it made sense until the lawyer cleared his throat and added, "There's a letter. Mrs. Reynolds insisted it be read only after the will." My cousin Derek leaned forward, eyes narrowed. She was confused. We left her at the airport because she refused to listen, not because we wanted this. His words landed like stones. 3 weeks earlier, the whole family had flown to Hawaii for what was supposed to be a reconciliation trip. Grandma Margaret, 84 and sharper than any of us, had argued the entire flight home about updating her will to include me properly. At PDX, when she wouldn't sign the new papers they had prepared, they simply walked away, leaving her with 2 suitcases and her walker in the arrivals hall. "She'll call a cab," my mother had said. But Grandma never called them. She called me. I had driven 4 hours from San Francisco the moment her shaky voice reached me. "Tobias, honey, they left me. Just come get your old grandma." When I arrived, she was sitting on a bench near baggage claim, sipping airport coffee like it was any Tuesday. No tears, just that stubborn glint in her blue eyes. On the drive back, she patted my hand. "I've fixed everything. You'll see." I thought she meant she'd forgive them. I had no idea she'd rewritten her entire life on paper. Now, in this room that smelled of lemon polish and old money, the letter was produced. The lawyer unfolded it slowly. "To my family," Grandma's elegant handwriting began. I could hear her voice in every word. She explained the abandonment wasn't an accident. She had staged the confrontation at the airport knowing they would react exactly as they did. I needed them to show their true colors so the court would understand why I chose Tobias. He never asked for a dime. He only asked to be loved as he is. The room went dead silent. My father stood up so fast his chair toppled. "This is fraud." But the lawyer simply raised a hand. "It's notarized, witnessed, and ironclad. Tobias, the estate is yours." I stared at the paper, vision blurring. All those years of Sunday dinners where my sexuality was the unspoken poison at the table. The Christmas when Dad told me to leave and never come back. The birthdays where only Grandma sent cards with $20 bills tucked inside, and a note saying, "Be proud, my boy." She had been my only anchor. And now she had handed me the keys to everything they valued, knowing it would shatter them. Derek stormed out first, muttering about lawyers and appeals. My mother followed, tears streaming, but not for me, for the money. Only my younger sister Chloe lingered, eyes wide. "Tobias, did you know?" I shook my head, throat tight. I didn't. But I knew what came next: war. That night, I sat alone in my hotel room, the city lights of Portland twinkling like distant stars. My phone buzzed. Isaiah. My Isaiah. The man who had taught me love didn't have to hurt. "How did it go, babe?" His voice was warm, steady, the one constant in my chaotic world. I told him everything, voice cracking. He didn't offer empty comfort. He just said, "Come home. We'll figure this out together." But home felt farther away than ever. Because the family wasn't done fighting. And neither was I. The next morning, I drove back to San Francisco with the lawyer's folder on the passenger seat like a live grenade. Isaiah met me at the door of our small apartment in the Castro, his dark curls still messy from sleep, wearing the faded Oregon Ducks hoodie I had given him 2 years ago. He pulled me into a hug that smelled like coffee and safety. "You look like you fought a war and lost," he said softly, kissing my temple. At 30, Isaiah was a high school history teacher who believed in second chances the way other people believed in gravity. His own family in rural Washington had taken the news of our relationship with tight smiles and Sunday prayers, but they never abandoned him. Not like mine. We sat on the tiny balcony overlooking the street where rainbow flags fluttered in the breeze. I told him about the letter, the airport abandonment, the way my mother's face had crumpled when she realized the hardware empire her father built was now legally mine. Isaiah listened without interrupting, fingers laced through mine. She chose you because she saw you, Tobias. Really saw you. His words should have comforted me. Instead, they stirred the old fear that maybe I had stolen something I didn't deserve. That afternoon, we walked to Dolores Park, the same place we had met at a Pride picnic 3 years earlier. I had been volunteering at the LGBT Youth Center, handing out water bottles, still raw from my last fight with Dad over the phone. Isaiah had shown up with his students carrying signs that read, "History belongs to all of us." He tripped over a cooler, spilling lemonade on my shoes, and laughed so hard I couldn't help joining him. 2 months later, we were official. Now, sitting on the grass watching kids play soccer, I wondered if our quiet life was about to explode. The first lawsuit papers arrived by courier 3 days later. Uncle Richard claimed undue influence. Derek added a clause about Grandma's supposed dementia. My mother texted me a single line: "Fix this, or you're dead to us." I stared at the screen until Isaiah gently took the phone away. "They're scared," he said. "Not of losing money. Of losing the story they told themselves about you being the problem." I threw myself into work, designing logos for local nonprofits until my eyes burned. Isaiah cooked pasta and listened to me rage about every childhood memory that resurfaced. The time Dad burned my sketchbooks because real men don't draw pretty pictures. The night Mom found a note from my high school boyfriend and cried for hours like I had murdered someone. Grandma had driven 2 hours to pick me up that night, letting me sleep on her couch without questions. She had never said the words, "I'm proud of you being gay," but she showed it every single day. One evening, Isaiah came home early from school carrying a small box. Inside was a framed photo of me and Grandma at my college graduation, her arm around my shoulders, both of us grinning like we'd won the lottery. "She sent this to me last month," he admitted. "Said to give it to you when things got hard." My chest ached. She had known what was coming. The misunderstanding started when Chloe called. "Derek says you visited her in the nursing home every week and pressured her to change the will." It wasn't true. I had visited, yes, but only after she asked me to. We played cards and talked about books. She never mentioned money. But the family had already decided I was the villain. Isaiah squeezed my hand across the dinner table. "Truth has a way of coming out, Tobias. Just like you did." He was right. But truth also had a way of breaking things that might never heal. That night, I lay awake listening to his steady breathing and wondered how much more my heart could take before it chose between the man I loved and the family I was never allowed to keep. The court date was set for October. In the meantime, the family turned every holiday into a battlefield. Labor Day weekend, Chloe invited me to a barbecue at the old house to talk like adults. Isaiah drove with me, his hand on my knee the entire 4 hours. When we pulled up, the American flag on the porch was the only welcoming thing. Mom hugged Chloe but ignored me. Dad grunted something about traffic. Derek refused to shake my hand. Grandma's old rocking chair sat empty on the porch like a ghost. I touched the worn wood and remembered her telling me at 16, "Love is love, Tobias. The rest is noise." She had said it after catching me kissing a boy behind the barn. Never told a soul. That secret had kept me alive. The argument started over potato salad. Uncle Richard accused me of turning her against us with your lifestyle. Isaiah, usually the calm one, set his plate down. Mrs. Reynolds made her own choices. She loved Tobias exactly as he is. The table went silent. Mom started crying again. Dad told Isaiah to leave. I stood up, chair scraping. He stays or I go. For the first time in years, I didn't flinch when Dad raised his voice. I simply took Isaiah's hand and walked out. On the drive home, Isaiah was quiet. "You chose me over them," he said finally. "That means everything." But I could hear the worry underneath. His own parents had started calling more often, asking when he was bringing that boy home for Thanksgiving. The pressure was mounting on both sides. 2 weeks later, the betrayal came from someone I never expected. My best friend since freshman year, Marcus, the straight ally who had marched in every pride parade with me. He called sounding nervous. Derek offered me money to say, "I overheard you talking about the inheritance last year." I said no, but he recorded our old conversations somehow. Twisted them. Marcus had been the one who introduced me to Isaiah. Now he was caught in the crossfire. I told him to stay out of it, but the damage was done. The family had screenshots of old texts where I joked about finally being able to afford a real apartment. Out of context, it looked damning. Isaiah and I spent that night on the couch going through every email, every bank statement, proving I had never asked Grandma for anything. At 3 a.m., he rested his head on my shoulder. "She's watching, you know. She'd be so proud of how you're fighting." I wanted to believe him. But the fear that I was destroying my family for money I didn't even want kept me awake until dawn. The turning point arrived in the mail the next week, a thick envelope from Grandma's attorney. Inside was a second letter, dated 2 days before the Hawaii trip. "Tobias, if you're reading this, they did exactly what I thought they would. I left you everything because you built a life without their approval. You loved openly when it cost you everything. That's the kind of strength this family needs. Use the money to help kids like you were. And love that teacher of yours with all you've got. He's the real treasure." I read it aloud to Isaiah, voice breaking on every sentence. He wiped my tears with his thumbs. "She didn't just leave you money. She left you permission to be happy." For the first time since the will reading, I felt the weight lift. Not completely, but enough to breathe. The next day I called the lawyer and asked him to schedule a meeting with the entire family. No lawyers, no court. Just us. Isaiah offered to come, but I said no. This was something I had to do alone. As I hung up, I realized the boy who once hid in closets was finally ready to stand in the light. The family meeting happened at the old house on a rainy Saturday. I arrived early, parking behind Grandma's ancient Buick that still sat in the garage. The smell of rain on pine needles brought back every summer I spent there as a kid, before I was labeled broken. Mom opened the door, eyes red. "Your father almost didn't come. But he did, sitting at the head of the table like always." Derek and Uncle Richard flanked him. Chloe sat beside me, the only neutral face. I placed Grandma's second letter in the center of the table. "Read it." All of it. They did, in silence broken only by the ticking grandfather clock. When they finished, Dad rubbed his face with both hands. "She really thought we would abandon her." Mom whispered, "We did." The admission hung in the air like smoke. Derek tried one last time. "This doesn't prove anything." She was old, but Chloe spoke up. "It proves she knew exactly who she was leaving it to. And why." For the first time I saw doubt flicker across my uncle's face. I told them everything then, no filter. How Grandma had paid my first semester of college when Dad cut me off. How she visited me in San Francisco and met Isaiah, calling him that nice young man afterward. How the airport abandonment was her final test to make sure the family understood what unconditional love actually cost. Isaiah waited in the car the whole time. When I walked out 2 hours later, he didn't ask questions. He just drove us to the coast, to Grandma's cabin that was now legally mine. We built a fire and sat on the porch swing she had loved. "They didn't apologize," I said. "But they didn't fight either." Isaiah rested his head against mine. "That's a start." The next weeks were a blur of paperwork and quiet conversations. Mom started calling on Sundays, awkward but trying. Dad sent a text saying the business needed a new logo and maybe I could design it. Small steps. Chloe moved to Portland and began volunteering at the same LGBT youth center where I had met Isaiah. The family wasn't healed, but the fracture lines were softening. One evening in November, Isaiah and I drove to the airport, the same one where Grandma had been left. We stood at the exact bench, and I placed a single white rose there. "Thank you," I whispered to the wind. Isaiah slipped his arm around my waist. "She'd want you to live big, Tobias. Not just for her. For us." That night back home, I opened my laptop and started sketching plans for the Margaret Reynolds Foundation, a scholarship fund for queer kids from conservative families. Isaiah watched over my shoulder, smiling. She picked the right heir. For the first time I believed it. But the real test was still coming. Thanksgiving at the old house. The whole family. And this time Isaiah was invited as my partner, not my friend. Thanksgiving arrived cold and bright. I drove up with Isaiah, our hands linked on the gear shift the entire way. When we pulled into the driveway, the house looked the same, yet everything felt different. Mom met us at the door with an actual hug for Isaiah. "Glad you could come," she said, voice only slightly strained. Dad shook his hand without meeting his eyes, but it was a start. Derek stayed quiet, helping set the table. Chloe winked at me across the room. Dinner was tense at first. The turkey was perfect, the stuffing exactly like Grandma used to make. Halfway through, Uncle Richard cleared his throat. I dropped the lawsuit. Figured Margaret would haunt me if I didn't. Laughter broke out, small and surprised. Then Dad looked straight at me. "I was wrong, son. About a lot of things." The words were simple, but they cracked something open inside my chest I had kept sealed for a decade. After pie, Isaiah and I walked the back field where I had once hidden to cry after coming out. The stars were sharp overhead. "You did it," he said. "You faced them without losing yourself." I pulled him close, breathing in the scent of his cologne and the cold night air. "I couldn't have without you." We kissed there under the same sky Grandma had taught me to wish on, soft and full of promise. But the biggest surprise came 2 days later. Marcus called, voice shaking. Derek apologized. Actually apologized. Said he was ashamed. The betrayal that had hurt most was mending in ways I never expected. Isaiah and I celebrated with takeout Thai and dancing in the living room to old songs, laughing until our sides hurt. Christmas was quieter. We hosted at the cabin, inviting whoever wanted to come. Mom and Dad drove up. Chloe brought her new girlfriend. Isaiah's parents even made the trip from Washington, bringing their famous pecan pie. Around the tree that night, with lights twinkling and laughter filling the rooms, I felt Grandma's presence stronger than ever. She had given me more than money. She had given me back my family on my own terms. In January, the foundation launched. The first scholarship went to a 17-year-old from Idaho who reminded me so much of myself at that age. Isaiah stood beside me at the ceremony, proud and steady. When the young man hugged me afterward, whispering, "You gave me hope," I finally understood why Grandma had chosen me. Life settled into a new rhythm. Work, love, the foundation, Sunday calls with Mom that were getting easier. The misunderstandings that once tore us apart became stories we told with careful smiles. The secrets had been laid bare. The sacrifices had been worth it. Yet one final truth remained. On a rainy February evening, Isaiah got down on one knee in our living room, ring box open. "Marry me, Tobias. Let's build the life your grandma always wanted for you." I said yes before he finished the sentence, tears mixing with laughter. The wedding was small, held at the cabin in June when the rhododendrons were in full bloom. Grandma's rocking chair sat in the front row draped with her favorite shawl. Mom walked me down the aisle. Dad gave a toast that actually mentioned how proud he was of the man I had become. Isaiah's parents danced with mine. Chloe was my best woman. Marcus stood beside Isaiah as groomsman, the old betrayal forgiven and forgotten. Under a canopy of string lights, I promised to love Isaiah through every challenge, every misunderstanding, every triumph. When he slid the ring on my finger and kissed me, the applause that rose felt like the whole universe cheering. Later, as we slow danced to Grandma's favorite song, I whispered, "She won." Isaiah smiled against my cheek. We all did. The years that followed were not perfect, but they were ours. The foundation grew, helping hundreds of kids find their voices. The family business thrived under new management that included me on the board. Mom and Dad visited San Francisco often, even marching in Pride once. Derek sent a baby gift when Chloe and her wife had their first child. The rifts had healed into scars that told a story of survival. Isaiah and I adopted a little boy named Eli 2 years later. Watching him run through the same fields where I once hid my truth, I saw the circle complete. One night, Eli asked why some families fight about love. I told him the story of a brave grandmother who refused to let fear win. He fell asleep in my arms, safe in a world that was slowly becoming kinder. Sitting on the porch swing years later, Isaiah's hand in mine and Eli's laughter drifting from inside, I thought about the question that had haunted me since that first day in the lawyer's office. Blood had tried to break us. Choice had rebuilt us stronger. Grandma had known the difference all along. True or false, blood ties matter more than unconditional love in defining family.